Ethan leaned across the white linen table, his voice just loud enough for the donors to hear. "You really think you're saving the world in that uniform?" My fork froze midair. The chandelier light felt suddenly colder. I could have fired back, but instead, I pushed my chair back and walked toward Luke Hale, a young officer in a brace, eyes tired but unbroken. "Would you like to dance?" One step, another. The room held its breath. Then his father, General Hale, appeared beside us and said 7 words that turned my family and my career upside down. Ethan's laugh cut through the clinking of wine glasses like a dull blade. "You really think you're saving the world in that uniform?" he said, loud enough for the nearest table to hear. I kept my eyes on my plate, pretending to study the roasted vegetables, even though my stomach had tied itself into a sailor's knot. It was the annual Black Tie Gala in D.C., a night meant to honor service members, celebrate milestones, raise funds. I'd worn my dress uniform, the one with the polished brass that took me an hour to clean. My mother had insisted we all attend as a family, but now, sitting under the heavy crystal chandelier, I realized what she'd really wanted was to show me off, then cut me down when I shined too bright. Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking like we were still kids and he'd just won some private game. The urge to say something sharp clawed at the back of my throat. Instead, I swallowed it. I pushed back my chair, ignoring the startled glance from Grace. That's when I saw him, Luke Hale, sitting near the far end of the ballroom. His uniform jacket hung slightly loose on him. His right leg was braced from hip to ankle. I'd met him once, months ago, in a ward where the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I walked right up to his table. "Luke," I said softly, "would you like to dance?" His brow furrowed for a second, as if to check whether I was joking. Then, without a word, he shifted forward, planting one good foot on the parquet. One careful step. The room's chatter began to dim. Another step, slow, deliberate. I stayed right beside him, not leading, just matching his pace. The music didn't even match our steps, but it didn't matter. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned. In my peripheral vision, I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth, not in awe, but in horror at what she'd call a scene. Then a deep voice joined us. General Robert Hale, Luke's father, stood a breath away. His gaze locked on mine, and his jaw tightened like he was measuring every syllable. Then he said it. "Colonel, you just saved my son's life." 7 words, but they hit like a drumbeat I could still hear in my chest. Across the room, Ethan's smirk had vanished. My mother's hand had dropped from her face, replaced by an unreadable expression, part fury, part confusion. I smiled, not wide, not smug, just enough to tell myself that tonight's narrative had shifted. And maybe, so had everything else. The car ride home felt like sitting in a glass box rolling through the city everyone could see in, no one could hear us. My mother folded her hands in her lap like church ladies praying they won't say something cruel. Ethan didn't bother with restraint. "So, that stunt, was that for the cameras or the donors?" he asked, phone glow lighting his jaw. "Because if you wanted attention, congrats. You got it." I kept my eyes on the monuments gliding by. "It wasn't a stunt." "Then what was it?" he snorted. "Pity choreography?" My voice stayed level. "It was respect. Luke doesn't need pity. He needed someone to meet him where he was." Mom exhaled. "Avery, darling, you put yourself at the center of the evening. People were there to honor service, not watch therapy." I froze. Therapy. Like it was a dirty word. My chest tightened. "I wasn't putting myself at the center," I said quietly. "I was moving out of the way." Ethan laughed. "Out of the way? You were center stage." He tilted his screen toward me. Notifications raced. "Look, already trending. Colonel Cole's dance. That play for clout will backfire." Pow. I turned toward the window and counted streetlights, 10, 15, until the knot loosened enough to breathe. "You're projecting," I said. Again. He muttered and went back to scrolling. By morning, headlines multiplied. Some were kind, most were not. Split-screen thumbnails, hero or attention seeker. A blog quoted unnamed sources questioning my judgment in Kandahar. They wrote like they'd been there. They hadn't. I brewed coffee I didn't drink and called the ward. Luke had slept better, his nurse said. He'd asked if I always moved to the rhythm of someone else's breath. I didn't have an answer. At work, a junior officer, Alexis Park, caught me in the hallway. "Ma'am," she said, cheeks flushed. "That thing you did last night, it mattered." She glanced around, then added, "Some of us have been waiting for someone to choose presence over performance." I nodded. Presence over performance, hold me to that. An email pinged. Subject, friendly heads up. The body was not friendly. A policy fellow I barely knew pasted a draft op-ed accusing me of compromising a unit years ago by pursuing optics over outcomes. Attached were supposed after-action notes. The header looked wrong. The spacing was off. Someone had cooked it. I took a breath. Another. I sent it to legal, then to our Inspector General intake. No speeches, just facts. Around noon, Mom called. "Sweetheart, damage control. We should get ahead of this." "We?" My voice cracked. "Mom, Ethan's friends are feeding this." Silence. Then, "He says he's worried about you. He says you chase moments, that you escalate." I stood frozen under the fluorescent buzz. "I escalate?" I whispered. "Or I refuse to shrink?" Her breath hitched. "Just be careful." "I am," I said, "and I'm not alone." I opened a blank document. Title, Presence over Performance. If they wanted a narrative, I'd give them one built with testimony, timestamps, and the one thing scandal never expects: patience. 3 days later, a letter arrived, thick envelope, government seal. I slid it open expecting some new inquiry into the incident. Instead, it was an invitation from Walter Reed. They wanted me to speak to a group of officers in rehab, men and women in various stages of recovery. It wasn't a podium and praise kind of thing. The note made it clear they wanted candor, not ceremony. I said yes without checking my calendar. I needed air. I needed to be around people who knew what it was to rebuild inch by inch. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the rehab gym was the sound. Not music breath. Exhales timed with effort. Metal clinks from adjustable weights. The soft thump of a prosthetic foot finding its rhythm on the parallel bars. Luke was there, eyes lighting when he spotted me. "You came," he said, not as a question. I said I would. I took my jacket off and rolled my sleeves. "Where do you want to start?" We didn't talk about the gala. Instead, I walked beside him down the bars. His gait was uneven, but steady. Every time he faltered, he'd glance at me not for instruction, just for confirmation that the ground hadn't shifted. A young, private, barely 20, was struggling at the far end. Sweat slicked his brow. Luke paused mid-step and called out, "Match my count, Private. 1, 2. The kid tried. Failed. Tried again. On the third pass, he kept pace. I realized Luke was doing for him what I'd done for Luke, and he wasn't thinking about it, he was just passing it on. Alexis Park approached between sets. "Ma'am, the way you move with them, it's like you're listening with your whole body." I smiled. "That's the only way it works." For 2 hours, I stayed. No speeches, no applause. Just sweat and silence broken by small victories, an extra step, a smoother pivot, a grip that didn't give out. On my way out, Luke handed me a folded paper. "Read it later," he said. In my car, I opened it. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. "You didn't save my life at the gala. You reminded me it was still mine." That night, my inbox pinged again, this time from a name I hadn't seen in years, Mira Stanton, Ethan's ex-wife. Subject, "You should see this." Now, attachments, spreadsheets, emails, and one PDF labeled Strategic Messaging, Symposium Plan. In it, clear as daylight, Ethan's name sat next to bullet points. Discredit Avery Cole before pilot vote. Use Kandahar narrative. Position as optics. First liability. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. My pulse didn't spike, it slowed. A strange calm. I hit download. Saved every file twice. Then I sent them straight to the Inspector General with a note. No comment. Documentation attached. Some dances happen under chandeliers. Others happen in the shadows, with no music at all, just the quiet certainty of your next step. The summons came faster than I expected, a formal notice from the Pentagon Review Board. Date, time, location. The kind of letter that feels heavy even when it's just a single page. I wore my service uniform again. Not for show, for armor. The hallway outside the review chamber smelled faintly of floor polish and burnt coffee, the same as every bureaucratic corner of DC. I sat, hands folded, listening to the echo of footsteps until they called my name. Inside, the long table was already full. Ethan sat near the far end in a crisp navy suit, not a hint of discomfort on his face. Beside him, a few familiar policy friends who'd once shaken my hand after speeches. None of them met my eye. The chair cleared his throat. Colonel Cole, today we will hear testimony regarding the Kandahar incident, subsequent public perception, and your recent conduct at the gala. They started with a timeline, most of it skewed by selective phrasing. I let them finish. Then the door opened, and in walked Commander Dana Miles. She carried a stack of files, no nonsense as ever. Ma'am, she began, addressing the board. I was present that night in Kandahar. The colonel was cut off from base support for hours. 9 critically injured personnel. 0 fatalities. That's not optics. That's triage under fire. She laid out each patient's case. Step-by-step stabilization, improvised equipment, the moment one soldier's airway collapsed and we rebuilt it with field tubing. Her voice never wavered. Mine almost did. When she finished, the room was quiet except for the faint scratch of someone's pen. That's when General Robert Hale, seated in the back, rose to speak. I requested this review, he said. Not to question Colonel Cole's actions, but to make them part of the record where they belong. He glanced toward Ethan. I saw my son walk because of her. That's not theater. That's service. Ethan shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. For the first time, he looked unsure. The chair asked if I wanted to add anything. I kept it short. I've never sought the spotlight, but I won't step out of it if the light exposes the truth. We adjourned after 2 hours. In the hallway, Dana clapped a hand on my shoulder. They can't bury this now. I wanted to believe her. But I knew Ethan. He wouldn't stop because of one hearing. That night, Mom called again. What did you do in there? Ethan says you made him look like a liar in front of generals. I let the silence stretch. Did I? Her breath caught. You embarrassed us for a dance, she said finally. I thought of Dad's old letter, tucked away in a cedar box. The only thing more dangerous than doing right is staying quiet while wrong keeps breathing. I looked out the window into the dark. Then I guess we'll all have to live with a little embarrassment. 2 weeks after the review, the official memo landed in my inbox. Colonel Avery Cole cleared of all allegations regarding Kandahar engagement. Recommendation, commendation review. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, wind whipping, knowing the ground behind you is still crumbling. Because the second half of the memo buried deep said Ethan was suspended, pending investigation. I didn't celebrate. I knew suspension wasn't exile. It was a pause. And my brother hated pauses. That night, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, just a location. Pine Bluff Overlook, 2,000 hours. No punctuation. I didn't need a signature. Pine Bluff was where Dad used to take us hiking. High enough to see the river bend, low enough to smell the cedar. I got there just before sunset, the horizon melting gold into deep blue. Ethan was already leaning against the railing, hands in his pockets. You came, he said, as if he hadn't invited me. I figured you didn't want to talk over a salad bar, I replied. He smirked, but it faltered. Look, I didn't plan for it to go this far. W. Which part? The lies, the smear pieces, or trying to kill a program that helps wounded soldiers? My voice was calm, but my palms were damp in my pockets. He stared at the ground. You've always been untouchable. People like you. They trust you. And me? He gave a bitter laugh. I'm the one who closes the deals, but nobody remembers my name. I just wanted to keep you manageable. Manageable. The word landed heavier than any insult. Not because I hate you, he added quickly. Because I was afraid if you outshined me, I'd disappear. For a second, I saw him as the boy who used to race me to the riverbank and pretend to let me win. But that boy had grown into a man who'd weaponized his insecurities. You don't have to be special to be good, Ethan, I said. He shook his head. Maybe you believe that. I don't. We stood in silence until the sun dropped below the tree line. Finally, he said, "So what now? You cut me off?" I took a breath, feeling the cedar-scented air in my lungs. "I stop letting you write my story. What you do with yours is up to you." When I turned to leave, he didn't follow. On the drive back, the radio played something slow, almost mournful. I didn't cry. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. Some ties don't snap in one clean break, they fray until one day you realize they're gone. The day of the ceremony felt strangely quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. It wasn't a grand televised event, no red carpets, no flashing cameras, just an auditorium at the base, flags lining the walls, and a few dozen chairs filled with uniforms and families. I'd tried to refuse the spotlight, but General Hale had looked me in the eye and said, "This isn't for you. It's for the record." Luke was there in his dress blues, walking without the brace for the first time since I'd met him. Alexis Park stood behind him, her eyes bright, and in the front row sat Dana Miles, hands folded but a rare smile breaking through. When they called my name, I walked to the stage. The medal rested in a velvet box on a small table. General Hale took it out, the ribbon catching the light, and stepped closer. His voice was low enough only I could hear. "This should have happened years ago." The weight of the medal around my neck was nothing compared to the weight that lifted from my shoulders. Then Luke took the podium. He cleared his throat and said, "She didn't fix me. She danced with me." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. And that's the thing about recovery, it's not about someone pulling you forward, it's about someone walking beside you until you can choose your own step. One by one, soldiers stood to share their own fragments. A woman spoke about being seen instead of dismissed as fragile. A man said the difference between pity and respect was the difference between quitting and trying again. I didn't know where to look, my throat was tight, my eyes threatening to betray me. In the corner of the room, I noticed a figure in civilian clothes. Ethan. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Our eyes met for half a heartbeat before he looked away. After the ceremony, people formed small circles, talking quietly. No one rushed to leave. I stepped outside for air, and the late afternoon sun was warm on my face. Luke joined me, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Big day," he said, handing me one. "Yeah," I replied, still scanning the lot where Ethan's car had been moments ago. Luke didn't ask. He just took a sip and said, "You know, that first night at the gala?" I almost said no. "I know," I said, "but you didn't." He smiled. "Neither did you." And for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe this wasn't the end of something but the middle of something worth staying for. It was Luke's idea to host the gathering in the garden behind the rehab center. No stage, no speeches, just music drifting from a portable speaker and strings of paper lanterns swaying in the warm evening air. By the time I arrived, a handful of soldiers were already there, mingling with their families. Some walked with canes, others in wheelchairs, all moving at their own pace. The smell of grilled corn and cedar chips filled the air. Someone had laid out folding chairs in a wide circle, leaving the center open. Luke found me near the snack table. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" I smiled, pretending not to know. "The last dance," he said, "the one without the chandelier." We stepped into the open space. This time there was no audience, no donors, no press. Just people who understood that any movement was a victory. I matched Luke's steps the way I had that first night, but slower now, letting the rhythm come from the laughter and quiet conversations around us. One by one, others joined. Alexis guided a young corporal forward, their steps uneven but steady. A father twirled his daughter her prosthetic, catching the lantern light with each spin. In the corner, Dana leaned against the fence, clapping softly in time with the music. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone at the garden gate. Ethan. He didn't come in. Just stood there, watching. His face was shadowed, but I thought I saw something: regret, maybe, or just recognition. When our eyes met, he gave the faintest nod. Then he turned and walked away before the song ended. I didn't follow. The music shifted to something slower, almost like a lullaby. The garden was full now, not just with bodies, but with a kind of quiet joy I hadn't felt in years. My chest loosened, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the next blow to fall. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the lanterns became the only light. Faces glowed in their warm shimmer, and I realized this was what repair looked like: messy, uneven, imperfect, but still moving forward. I used to think leadership meant charging ahead, clearing the path. Now I knew it was about making space so the people beside you could take their own step when they were ready. No headlines, no applause. Just the sound of feet on grass and the quiet certainty that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Standing in that lantern-lit garden, I realized the story had never really been about the gala, the headlines, or even the medal. It was about choosing again and again to stand beside people when it would be easier to walk away. Ethan and I may never share a holiday table again, and maybe that's okay. Some relationships mend, others simply stop bleeding. I've learned that both can be a kind of healing. Luke still walks with a slight limp, but I've seen him teach that same steady cadence to others, the way I taught him. Presence over performance, that's what endures. I'm not naive. I know family wounds don't vanish, but they also don't have to define every chapter. We get to write our own next steps, even if the people we love most never read them. So I'm leaving this here, not for applause, but for anyone standing on that edge between staying quiet and speaking up. Choose the step that lets you breathe. What would you do if your own brother tried to rewrite your story? Am I wrong for finally letting go? If this story resonated, share it, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories.